"You're just a cheap drafter," my boss sneered, throwing the portfolio I had spent 3 months perfecting onto the floor. I am Sabrina, 26 years old, and my blood boiled as the heavy pages of my innovative eco-resort landscape design scattered across the cold boardroom tiles. "Did you honestly think a community college grad could lead a multi-million-dollar project?" The senior partner laughed coldly, his polished dress shoes stepping right onto my meticulously hand-drawn blueprints. "You sketch, the elite architect's design. Know your place." I swallowed the humiliating lump in my throat, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my tears. Instead, I sank to my knees and frantically began gathering the ruined documents. This was my absolute masterpiece, dismissed as pure garbage in a matter of seconds. I stacked the folders, mentally preparing to pack up my desk and walk out of this toxic firm forever. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors burst open, and the entire room fell dead silent. The man everyone had been desperately waiting for, the ruthless billionaire client funding the entire island project, strode in with an intimidating aura. My boss instantly transformed. Plastering on a pathetic, sycophantic smile, he rushed forward with his hand extended. "Sir, welcome. We have the elite proposals ready." The billionaire didn't even blink at him. He completely ignored the extended hand, his sharp, calculating eyes locked entirely on the floor. On me, or rather, on the crumpled blueprint I was clutching to my chest. To everyone's absolute shock, he crouched down right beside me, his bespoke suit pooling against the floor, and gently pulled the paper from my trembling fingers. "Who drew this?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. My boss frantically scrambled to take the credit, opening his mouth to lie, but the billionaire silenced him with a single, chilling glare. He turned back to me, his intense expression shifting into pure awe. "This isn't just a draft. This is the exact vision I've been looking for. Are you the genius behind this?" A cheap drafter, not anymore. My entire world was about to flip upside down, and the revenge I was about to serve would be sweeter than I ever imagined. But before we get to the satisfying downfall of my arrogant boss, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on a story. That humiliating moment in the boardroom took me back 8 months earlier, when everything first started falling apart. My previous firm was acquired by a corporate conglomerate that cared solely about massive profit margins and rapid global expansion. The new executive board immediately restructured the entire creative department, brutally terminating anyone who did not fit their strict, heartless corporate mold. They fired me anyway. Security escorted me out of the building on a rainy Tuesday with nothing but a small, pathetic cardboard box. I spent the next 3 weeks trapped in a suffocating cycle of panic, sending out hundreds of resumes while watching my meager savings drastically dwindle. Desperation pushed me to meticulously refine my design portfolio, highlighting every intricate detail of the innovative public spaces I had beautifully conceptualized. I needed a lifeline immediately. When the interview invitation at Apex Landscape and Resort Design arrived, it felt like a desperate prayer had finally been answered. Apex was the undisputed titan of international luxury development, known globally for constructing extravagant, boundary-pushing paradises for the ultra-rich. Walking into their soaring architectural lobby, I felt entirely out of my depth amidst the sleek marble floors and intimidating modern art installations. It was undeniably terrifying. The receptionist directed me to a sprawling corner office where the senior partner, Kenneth Vaughan, sat behind an expansive mahogany desk. He did not bother to look up from his glowing computer monitor when I tentatively took the cold leather seat opposite him. For agonizing minutes, the only sound in the cavernous room was the sharp, rhythmic clicking of his expensive fountain pen against the polished wood. Silence suffocated the room. Finally, he snatched my carefully curated portfolio from the desk and began aggressively flipping through the heavy, glossy pages. His meticulously manicured fingers traced the lines of my previous urban greenway projects, with visible, dripping, unabashed disdain. I watched his perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrow together in profound disappointment as he analyzed the environmentally conscious irrigation systems I had thoughtfully designed. He let out a harsh sigh. Miss Sabrina, Apex caters exclusively to an elite clientele who expect unparalleled luxury and unimaginable extravagance in their vacation destinations, Kenneth began, his booming voice dripping with intense condescension. They do not want sustainable community vegetable gardens or modest walking trails designed for the absolute lowest common denominator of average society. Our wealthy investors demand imported exotic flora and massive structures that openly defy basic architectural logic just for pure aesthetics. You lack the proper vision. I tried desperately to defend my technical background, explaining how my deep understanding of soil mechanics could easily translate to luxury projects. I pointed out that foundational integrity and innovative water management were universally essential, regardless of whether the final budget was $10,000 or $10 million. I highlighted my flawless execution record and my absolute dedication to consistently meeting impossibly strict deadlines under severe pressure. He simply rolled his eyes. Your previous projects are undeniably pedestrian, completely lacking the sophisticated grandeur that our wealthy benefactors absolutely require before they open their wallets. Kenneth sneered, tossing my life's work casually back across the expansive desk. You do not possess the prestigious academic pedigree or the high society connections necessary to conceptualize a 5-star resort that charges $10,000 a single night. However, we recently lost a junior staff member and desperately need someone to quietly handle the tedious background work. I will hire you as a base-level drafter. The salary he offered was insultingly low, a mere fraction of what my technical expertise actually commanded in the highly competitive market. The title itself was a massive, humiliating demotion, perfectly designed to strip away any creative autonomy and relegate me to merely tracing over the ideas of prestigious architects. Yet, the looming threat of eviction and the mounting pile of unpaid utility bills left me with absolutely no negotiating leverage. I accepted the humiliating offer. Over the next 8 months, my daily existence at Apex became a grueling nightmare of endless, uncompensated overtime and constant belittlement from senior staff. I was forced to quietly fix the catastrophic structural errors in the blueprints submitted by Kenneth's favored, Ivy League-educated designers who barely understood fundamental physics. They happily took all the credit for the flawless final presentations, while I was regularly and publicly berated for minor formatting issues. The resentment quietly festered inside me. I secretly poured all my suppressed creativity and unacknowledged genius into an independent passion project during my brief, exhausted moments of free time. Knowing about the upcoming mega resort development, I meticulously drafted an entirely original concept that perfectly married high-end luxury with cutting-edge environmental sustainability. I foolishly believed that if Kenneth could just see the undeniable brilliance of the intricate design, he would finally recognize my true professional worth. I was tragically mistaken. Instead of actually listening to my presentation, he saw only a defiant, lower-tier subordinate stepping wildly out of her strictly enforced professional boundary. The sheer arrogance radiating from him as he coldly dismissed months of my painstaking labor was a visceral punch to my already exhausted spirit. The suffocating boardroom air grew impossibly thick with heavy tension, vibrating with the devastating emotional aftermath of his cruel, unwarranted professional rejection. My patience completely snapped. After Tristan Everett left the room, Kenneth Vaughan's attitude flipped completely within seconds. The senior partner abandoned his previous hostility and plastered on a sickeningly sweet smile that stretched entirely across his flushed face. He quickly pulled out the plush leather chair beside his massive desk, gesturing wildly for me to sit down like an esteemed guest. His blatant hypocrisy was nauseating. "My dear Sabrina, I always knew there was an untapped reservoir of brilliance hiding beneath your quiet daily exterior, Kenneth practically purred, his oily voice sliding smoothly over the silence of the boardroom. That magnificent presentation you delivered to our most important investor proves that you are absolutely ready for a massive promotion within our prestigious ranks. I am prepared to offer you the title of Senior Lead Architect immediately, complete with full creative control. The offer felt inherently poisonous. He swiftly slid a pristine, golden-embossed contract across the polished mahogany, tapping his expensive pen against the signature line with poorly concealed urgency. I stared down at the astronomical numbers printed boldly on the crisp white paper, fully aware that this exact amount would instantly solve every financial crisis currently plaguing my life. Just an hour ago, I would have traded almost anything for a fraction of this long-overdue professional recognition and monetary compensation. Now, it meant absolutely nothing. Looking at the man who had mercilessly ridiculed my educational background and completely dismissed my sustainable designs, a profound sense of clarity washed over my entire being. I slowly pushed the lucrative contract back across the desk, making sure to maintain unbroken, unyielding eye contact with the man who had made my life a nightmare. The sudden realization that my undeniable talent was no longer bound by his restrictive corporate standards filled my lungs with fresh air. I declined his offer. Kenneth's meticulously crafted smile instantly shattered into a rigid mask of absolute, unadulterated shock as I calmly picked up my battered leather satchel and turned toward the doors. He sputtered out confused, angry demands for an explanation, completely unable to comprehend why a lowly subordinate would ever dare to walk away from such immense corporate wealth. I did not bother wasting another single breath trying to explain my intrinsic worth to a man who only saw value when a billionaire pointed it out. I simply walked away. The moment I stepped out of the suffocating skyscraper and into the bustling afternoon streets, my trembling fingers immediately pulled my worn smartphone from my deep coat pocket. I scrolled rapidly through my neglected contact list until I found the familiar names of two incredibly talented colleagues who had suffered the exact same brutal corporate layoffs. Without second-guessing my sudden surge of adrenaline-fueled courage, I drafted a quick, urgent text message begging them to meet me at our favorite local coffee shop. I needed their brilliant minds. Within 30 minutes, I was sitting in a cozy, sunlit booth across from Danielle Rhodes, a brilliant botanical specialist who possessed an unparalleled knowledge of native coastal flora. Sitting right next to her was Kelsey Monroe, a fierce, unapologetically bold structural engineer who possessed an extraordinary talent for blending heavy brutalist architecture seamlessly into delicate natural environments. They both listened in stunned, wide-eyed silence as I passionately recounted the chaotic events of the morning and unveiled the intricate blueprints. The atmosphere crackled with electricity. Danielle leaned eagerly over the sticky wooden table, her eyes scanning the complex soil irrigation charts with a hungry, desperate passion that corporate bureaucracy had nearly extinguished. She immediately began pointing out specific indigenous plants that could naturally filter the greywater systems of the proposed resort without requiring any expensive chemical treatments. Kelsey rapidly sketched aggressive geometric support structures onto a torn napkin, visibly calculating load-bearing capacities that would allow my eco-friendly villas to securely anchor into the cliffs. Their combined expertise was undeniable. Watching my two fiercely intelligent friends interact with my core designs, breathing vivid, dynamic life into the static lines on the page, the final piece of my ambitious plan locked perfectly into place. I formally proposed that we completely pool our limited resources to build something entirely our own, instead of begging for scraps at massive conglomerates. We could actively target the highly lucrative niche market of ultra-luxury, zero-carbon footprint developments that prioritized authentic environmental integration over generic aesthetics. We needed a new company. Danielle immediately agreed without a single shred of hesitation, declaring fiercely that she would rather risk complete financial bankruptcy than ever design another sterile country club golf course. Kelsey slammed her palms onto the table in enthusiastic agreement, already mentally drafting the necessary corporate registration documents and aggressively calculating our required initial startup capital. We spent the next 3 hours furiously debating branding strategies, market positioning, and the logistical nightmare of securing proper commercial licensing in such a notoriously competitive industry. Lumina Landscape Studio was born. The first 6 months of building Lumina Landscape Studio tested every limit we had. We pooled our meager severance packages together to rent a cramped, poorly ventilated basement office that constantly smelled of damp concrete and cheap instant coffee. Danielle and Kelsey crammed their massive drafting tables into corners that barely accommodated our rapidly accumulating stacks of reference materials and topographical maps. We survived entirely on adrenaline. Every single dollar we spent was meticulously tracked on a giant whiteboard, reminding us constantly of the rapidly shrinking runway we had before utter financial ruin. We worked exhausting 18-hour days, aggressively cold-calling regional developers who repeatedly dismissed our fledgling studio as simply too green for their ambitious commercial ventures. Rejection after brutal rejection threatened to extinguish the burning passion that had initially convinced us to abandon the safety of corporate employment. The pressure was suffocating. Our desperate luck finally shifted during a terribly organized local real estate mixer when we accidentally cornered a stressed mid-level manager named Marcus Thorne. He was desperately searching for a highly cost-effective landscaping solution for a struggling boutique eco-lodge that his parent company had nearly abandoned due to massive budget overruns. Recognizing a mutual desperation, I aggressively pitched our entire studio's philosophy right there near the stale appetizer table, promising him unprecedented value and innovative execution. He took the gamble. Marcus handed over the chaotic site plans the very next morning, granting us an impossibly tight deadline and a budget so restrictive it bordered on absolute absurdity. Instead of immediately relying on standard commercial templates, our dedicated trio piled into my beat-up sedan and drove directly to the remote coastal property to physically assess the challenging terrain. We spent 3 grueling days hiking through dense, overgrown brush and carefully analyzing the natural watershed patterns that previous contractors had ignored. The land spoke loudly. I guided our creative sessions by insisting that we stop fighting the rugged topography and instead design a fluid landscape that actively embraced the natural elevation changes. Danielle formulated an incredibly ingenious planting schedule utilizing resilient, drought-tolerant indigenous species that completely eliminated the need for expensive, high-maintenance artificial irrigation systems. Meanwhile, Kelsey engineered brilliant terraced retaining walls using locally sourced reclaimed stone that seamlessly blended the modern lodging structures directly into the harsh coastal cliffs. Our synergy was undeniable. We meticulously refined every single detail of the master blueprint, ensuring that the final presentation clearly communicated both profound ecological sensitivity and significant long-term financial savings. When we finally presented the comprehensive package to Marcus and his skeptical regional directors, they were completely astounded by the sheer depth of our localized environmental knowledge. The innovative design not only solved their massive budget crisis, but actually elevated the property's entire aesthetic appeal far beyond their original luxury expectations. The approval was unanimous. Watching our meticulously drafted concepts physically manifest into reality over the following months was an intensely validating experience that completely erased our previous corporate traumas. The boutique eco-lodge officially opened to overwhelming critical acclaim, drawing wealthy eco-conscious tourists who specifically praised the harmonious integration of the breathtaking architecture with the untamed natural surroundings. Marcus personally called to congratulate our entire team, explicitly crediting our revolutionary landscape architecture for transforming a failing investment into their portfolio's crown jewel. We celebrated deeply. That monumental initial success fundamentally altered the local industry's perception of our capabilities, slowly shifting our status from desperate newcomers to highly sought-after sustainability experts. Impressed by the lodge's astonishing profit margins, Marcus enthusiastically referred our specialized services to several other prominent regional developers who were actively seeking modern, cost-effective environmental solutions. Our studio phone finally started ringing with legitimate inquiries, replacing our stressful outbound cold-calling routine with exciting preliminary consultations for increasingly ambitious commercial projects. The tide had turned. We excitedly signed 2 additional boutique resort contracts within the exact same month, officially securing enough projected revenue to guarantee our business operations for the next 2 years. The suffocating financial anxiety that had heavily blanketed our cramped basement office finally lifted, allowing us to genuinely focus our mental energy on pushing creative boundaries. Danielle and Kelsey excitedly began upgrading our outdated design software, while I carefully outlined a strategic expansion plan to aggressively capture a larger share of the luxury eco-market. We were finally breathing. With our foundational reputation firmly established, we successfully relocated Lumina Landscape Studio out of that dark basement and into a modest but beautifully sunlit industrial loft space. We carefully hired our very first junior assistant to manage the overwhelming influx of administrative tasks, ensuring our core trio remained fiercely focused entirely on innovative design work. Looking around our vibrant, buzzing new studio, filled with thriving native plants and sprawling architectural blueprints, I felt a profound sense of genuine professional fulfillment. We had truly arrived. Everything changed the day we presented at the National Landscape and Resort Design Conference. Securing a coveted speaking slot at this highly prestigious industry event was almost impossible for an unknown firm, but Kelsey aggressively leveraged an old academic connection to secure us 30 minutes on the secondary stage. We spent several exhausting weeks meticulously compiling a breathtaking multimedia presentation that perfectly highlighted the financial and ecological triumphs of our boutique eco-lodge without revealing any proprietary developer secrets. The sheer stakes were monumental. Walking into the colossal, glass-domed convention center, we were immediately swallowed by a vast sea of elite architects wearing tailored designer suits and sporting incredibly arrogant attitudes. I tightly gripped my presentation tablet, trying desperately to ignore the condescending, skeptical glances thrown our way by established industry veterans who clearly viewed our small studio as an utter joke. Danielle gently squeezed my shoulder, while Kelsey confidently marched ahead to rapidly locate our assigned lecture hall, radiating a fierce determination that steadied my racing heartbeat. We finally found our room. As I nervously connected my tablet to the enormous projection system, the heavy auditorium doors swung open to admit a surprisingly large crowd of influential industry professionals actively seeking fresh ideas. My blood suddenly ran ice cold when I spotted Kenneth taking a prominent seat in the front row alongside Garrett Nolan, the notoriously ruthless CEO of the Apex Landscape conglomerate. Kenneth immediately leaned over to whisper something malicious into Garrett's ear, his face twisting into that familiar, mocking smirk as he deliberately locked his eyes onto mine. I firmly refused to break. Taking a deep, profoundly stabilizing breath, I stepped confidently out from behind the restrictive wooden podium and began weaving a compelling narrative about harmonizing luxury infrastructure with fragile native ecosystems. Vivid, high-definition photographs of our completed coastal terraced walls flashed beautifully across the giant screen, immediately accompanied by undeniable financial data proving that our sustainable methods drastically reduced long-term maintenance costs. I spoke with unwavering conviction, thoroughly detailing how our holistic design philosophy actively healed the surrounding natural environment instead of violently bulldozing over it for outdated aesthetics. The entire audience was captivated. Even the most aggressively skeptical architects in the crowded room found themselves furiously taking detailed notes as I confidently broke down the complex proprietary irrigation matrices that Danielle had brilliantly engineered. Kenneth's previously arrogant expression slowly dissolved into a rigid mask of furious disbelief, realizing with creeping horror that the supposedly cheap drafter he had discarded was currently schooling the entire industry. Garrett Nolan sat perfectly motionless, his piercing gaze darting rapidly between the revolutionary financial projections illuminating the screen and my commanding presence at the front of the hushed auditorium. The crucial momentum was completely mine, as my final, beautifully rendered slide faded to black. A thunderous wave of genuine applause erupted throughout the cavernous space, finally validating every single agonizing sacrifice our dedicated trio had recently made. I confidently opened the floor for a brief question-and-answer segment, fully expecting the usual technical inquiries regarding soil load-bearing capacities or the complicated sourcing logistics for our reclaimed architectural materials. Before anyone else could even manage to raise a hand, Tristan Everett, the legendary billionaire developer from my past, abruptly stood up in the shadowed back row. The excited murmuring immediately stopped dead. He slowly descended the carpeted auditorium stairs with a silent predator's grace, his sharp, calculating eyes locked exclusively on me with the exact same intense awe he had mysteriously displayed 8 months ago. Your young firm's ability to seamlessly fuse unapologetic luxury with genuine ecological responsibility is the exact revolutionary vision the international resort market has been failing to produce for decades, he stated powerfully. He cast a withering, heavily dismissive glance directly at the front row, where Kenneth and Garrett sat, intentionally letting the silence amplify his undeniable disappointment in their corporate philosophies. His profound words carried significant weight. Your exceptionally designed coastal models prove unequivocally that environmental preservation and 5-star hospitality are not mutually exclusive concepts, Tristan continued, his booming voice echoing off the high acoustic ceiling as he addressed the entirely captivated crowd. He gestured toward his former prospective partners in the front row, his expression hardening into one of unforgiving corporate finality that made the surrounding executives physically flinch in their seats. The sheer magnitude of his upcoming public declaration hovered heavily in the tense atmosphere, ready to fundamentally shatter the established hierarchy of the entire architectural world. The suspense was absolutely suffocating. I am officially halting all ongoing negotiations with Apex Landscape, and I formally invite Lumina Landscape Studio to take over as the exclusive lead visionary architects for my upcoming private island project, Tristan declared loudly. Absolute chaos instantly erupted across the lecture hall as dozens of influential developers began frantically pulling out their smartphones to search for our company credentials. Kenneth's face flushed a violent shade of purple as Garrett Nolan shot him a look of pure, unadulterated homicidal rage before violently shoving his way out of the seating row. The victory was incredibly absolute. Word of our success spread quickly, but so did Apex's attempts to catch up. The massive corporate conglomerate launched a highly aggressive marketing campaign, falsely claiming they were the original pioneers of sustainable luxury architecture. They started shamelessly duplicating our signature terraced retaining walls, furiously pitching these stolen ecological concepts to prominent developers at drastically reduced prices to secure quick contracts. The copycats were absolutely relentless. Garrett authorized his aggressive sales department to severely undercut our standard project bids, utilizing their vast financial reserves to simply bleed out smaller competitors. Prospective clients began questioning our premium pricing structure, waving Apex's heavily discounted proposals in our faces during crucial preliminary negotiation meetings. We realized that simply being the original innovators would not protect our growing studio from a multinational corporation willing to operate at a massive loss. We needed a defensive strategy. I spent several sleepless nights meticulously analyzing their submitted proposals, quickly realizing their Ivy League-educated architects completely lacked the practical field knowledge required to execute complex environmental designs. They were merely pasting our unique aesthetic features onto standard commercial templates without understanding the crucial underlying soil mechanics or complex watershed integrations. To permanently outpace their enormous corporate machine, we had to systematically build an army of brilliant minds who possessed genuine, hands-on architectural ingenuity. The solution was undeniable. Gathering our core team in the main drafting room, I proposed a radical new talent evaluation framework designed to completely bypass traditional corporate hiring metrics and meaningless university rankings. Instead of requesting polished resumes, we developed an incredibly rigorous practical examination that tested a candidate's innate ability to solve severe, real-world topographical disasters under extreme pressure. We wanted to find the brilliant drafters who were currently trapped in dark corporate basements doing the heavy lifting for arrogant senior partners. We prioritized raw talent. We launched a highly targeted recruitment campaign across various underground architectural forums, explicitly inviting passionate designers to submit anonymous solutions to a brutally complex coastal erosion scenario. The overwhelming influx of incredibly innovative submissions proved exactly what I had always known about the hidden, marginalized workforce actively powering the biggest architectural firms. We rigorously interviewed the top performers based entirely on their practical design mechanics, intentionally ignoring whether they had graduated from a prestigious university or a humble community college. The results were astounding. Within 2 short months, our studio floor was bustling with a fiercely dedicated team of unconventional architectural prodigies who shared our absolute obsession with authentic environmental integration. This rapid influx of brilliant personnel allowed us to aggressively scale our operational capacity without ever sacrificing the meticulous quality control that defined our premium brand. We seamlessly integrated these fresh designers into our demanding workflow, empowering them with the creative autonomy that corporate conglomerates systematically crushed out of their exhausted employees. Our firm rapidly evolved. Freed from the heavy burden of exhausting administrative problem-solving, Danielle shifted her professional focus exclusively toward mastering complex botanical planning and large-scale ecological mapping systems. She spent countless hours communicating directly with specialized agricultural universities, researching highly experimental soil remediation techniques that could naturally reverse decades of severe industrial chemical damage. Her groundbreaking research drastically elevated our firm's technical capabilities, allowing us to confidently guarantee absolute zero-carbon operational statuses for massive luxury resort developments across the globe. Her expertise became unparalleled. Simultaneously, Kelsey dove incredibly deep into the highly technical digital infrastructure of our expanding firm, systematically upgrading our structural engineering department with cutting-edge rendering software. She meticulously developed a proprietary 3-dimensional modeling framework that could instantly calculate the precise environmental impact of heavy construction materials across highly unstable geological terrains. By completely digitizing our complex load-bearing calculations, she effectively eliminated the dangerous structural blind spots that consistently plagued our corporate competitors' heavily discounted blueprints. Armed with an unstoppable new team of practical geniuses, we confidently began winning massive international contracts right out from under Apex's desperate, flailing grasp. Prominent developers quickly realized that Apex's heavily discounted copycat designs inevitably led to catastrophic ecological failures during actual construction, costing them millions in emergency structural revisions and massive fines. Lumina Landscape Studio rapidly became the undisputed industry standard for ambitious eco-luxury developments, completely dominating the high-end market by delivering flawless architecture that genuinely functioned exactly as promised. Our reputation became bulletproof. We decisively secured several major international resort contracts in rapid succession, officially cementing our permanent status as the absolute premier destination for elite, environmentally conscious property developers. The entire industry completely stopped comparing our innovative studio to the outdated corporate monoliths, finally recognizing our unique architectural framework as the undeniable future of luxury commercial design. As we watched our revolutionary concepts physically reshape fragile coastlines across the globe, the bitter memories of corporate rejection dissolved into the permanent foundation of our success. The victory was complete. 2 months after the conference, we received an unexpected proposal from Apex. A highly polished corporate emissary arrived directly at our bustling architectural loft, carrying a heavily redacted legal binder detailing Garrett Nolan's formal intent to completely acquire our rapidly expanding studio. The astronomical financial figure, printed boldly on the executive summary page, was specifically engineered to shock small business owners into immediate, unquestioning contractual submission to a massive corporate entity. We were not easily intimidated. Rather than immediately dismissing the lucrative buyout offer, Danielle, Kelsey, and I spent an entire weekend barricaded inside our main conference room, dissecting their underlying corporate motivations. We meticulously analyzed their recent catastrophic project failures, quickly determining that Apex desperately needed our authentic, sustainable reputation to salvage their rapidly deteriorating public image within the elite eco-luxury market. Armed with this crucial market leverage, I carefully drafted a highly unorthodox counter-proposal that completely flipped their standard acquisition terms upside down. I demanded absolute control. The tension inside the luxurious Apex executive boardroom was absolutely suffocating when we arrived for the preliminary acquisition negotiations the following Tuesday morning. Garrett Nolan sat at the head of the massive glass table looking deceptively calm, while Kenneth, visibly seethed in the expensive leather chair immediately to his right, glaring at our arrival. I smoothly distributed copies of our heavily revised contractual terms, watching their high-powered legal team frantically scan the unexpected operational clauses with growing, visible alarm. The power dynamic shifted. Before Garrett could even launch into his carefully rehearsed corporate speech about synergistic market integration, I firmly outlined our absolute, non-negotiable operational boundaries. I explicitly stated that Lumina Landscape Studio would remain an entirely independent subsidiary, retaining absolute creative autonomy over all our ongoing environmental developments without any executive interference from the Apex board. Furthermore, I demanded the immediate creation of an autonomous global talent acquisition division that I would personally direct and entirely oversee without corporate oversight. The executive sat paralyzed. Kenneth instantly slammed his perfectly manicured hands violently against the pristine glass table, completely shattering the tense professional silence that had temporarily settled over the vast room. His face flushed a dangerous, mottled shade of crimson as he aggressively accused me of blatant corporate extortion, furiously arguing that a former junior drafter had absolutely no right to dictate high-level structural changes. He desperately pleaded with Garrett to reject the absurd demands immediately, claiming my unconventional hiring framework would completely destroy their prestigious brand identity. His panic was palpable. I completely ignored his unprofessional, emotionally volatile outburst and calmly activated the boardroom's central projection system to display our meticulously compiled comparative data analysis. The enormous high-definition screen instantly illuminated with stark, undeniable statistical graphs highlighting the massive profit margins of our eco-resorts, juxtaposed against the disastrous compounding cost overruns of Kenneth's recent traditional projects. I coolly pointed out that our fiercely merit-based recruitment strategy had already generated more positive international press coverage in 6 months than Apex had managed in 5 years. Numbers do not lie. Continuing my methodical presentation without missing a beat, I systematically broke down the profound long-term financial benefits of utilizing practical architectural talent over theoretically trained academicians who severely lacked actual fieldwork experience. I presented extensively documented evidence proving that our unconventional designers caught catastrophic environmental engineering flaws during the initial blueprint phase, saving prominent developers millions in potential regulatory fines and complex structural remediation costs. By aggressively adopting our radical evaluation framework, Apex could effectively eliminate their chronic construction delays and immediately restore their crumbling market dominance. The logic was bulletproof. Garrett leaned forward slowly in his imposing leather chair, steepling his fingers thoughtfully as his sharp, analytical mind rapidly processed the overwhelming empirical evidence I had just laid out before him. He entirely ignored Kenneth's frantic, desperately whispered warnings, his cold, calculating eyes systematically evaluating the undeniable direct correlation between our unorthodox talent acquisition methods and our phenomenal market success. The ruthless CEO finally realized that maintaining their outdated, elitist hiring practices was actually costing his multinational conglomerate hundreds of millions of dollars in lost international contracts. He saw the truth. Sensing his crucial mental shift in perspective, I firmly reiterated that our unique corporate culture and highly specialized talent pool were the actual valuable assets they were desperately attempting to purchase. If they merely swallowed our respected brand name while forcefully requiring us to adopt their toxic, restrictive management structure, they would instantly extinguish the exact innovative spark they were paying a massive premium to acquire. They needed our progressive operational framework far more than we needed their massive influx of corporate capital to sustain our steep upward trajectory. The ultimatum was clear. I calmly packed my detailed presentation materials back into my battered leather satchel, deliberately projecting an aura of absolute professional indifference regarding the final outcome of the incredibly tense corporate negotiation. I respectfully informed Garrett that he had exactly 48 hours to thoroughly review our stringent autonomy requirements before we officially withdrew from the acquisition discussions entirely and pursued independent global expansion. As we confidently walked out of the heavy mahogany boardroom doors, the profound silence we left behind spoke volumes about the rapidly shifting hierarchy of the modern architectural world. The seed was planted. The negotiation meetings became increasingly tense over the following weeks. We spent grueling hours locked inside their corporate headquarters, meticulously debating every complex line of the proposed operational autonomy contracts until our eyes blurred. Garrett Nolan's elite legal team deployed every aggressive intimidation tactic in their extensive arsenal, desperately attempting to water down my stringent demands for absolute creative control. We held our ground fiercely. The inevitable breaking point occurred during a heated Tuesday afternoon session when Kenneth condescendingly questioned my fundamental ability to manage a massive global division. He smugly referenced my lack of an Ivy League degree, desperately clinging to the exact elitist academic metrics that had systematically driven his own department into a financial crisis. I leaned aggressively across the polished mahogany table, forcing him to maintain unbroken eye contact as I systematically dismantled his deeply flawed architectural philosophy. His arrogance instantly evaporated. I loudly reminded him that the supposedly cheap drafter he had violently dismissed was currently outperforming his entire senior staff with merely a fraction of his bloated operating budget. I pointed directly at the dismal quarterly financial projections lying exposed between us, explicitly highlighting exactly how his blind obsession with high society connections had blinded him to genuine architectural innovation. The stark reality of his massive professional failures hung heavily in the freezing boardroom air, leaving him absolutely speechless and visibly trembling with suppressed rage. The truth cut incredibly deep. Our leverage at the negotiation table drastically increased when Tristan Everett began aggressively pulling his massive international investments out of any firm associated with environmentally destructive building practices. The influential billionaire developer publicly endorsed our unique ecological framework in a major financial publication, sending a massive shockwave through the global market that caused Apex's corporate stock to plummet overnight. Garrett immediately received furious phone calls from his panicked board of directors, demanding radical structural changes to salvage their rapidly depreciating financial portfolios before the fiscal quarter ended. The pressure became absolutely unbearable. Realizing that further stubborn resistance would ultimately lead to complete corporate bankruptcy, Garrett abruptly dismissed Kenneth's frantic objections and permanently silenced the aggressive legal team. He slowly slid the finalized acquisition documents across the expansive glass table, his tired expression reflecting a profound, reluctant respect for the massive leverage we had successfully engineered against him. Every single strict condition I had originally proposed remained entirely intact, permanently cementing Lumina Landscape Studios' absolute operational independence within the larger conglomerate structure. We had officially won the war. I carefully picked up the heavy fountain pen resting on the table, briefly reflecting on the chaotic, incredibly challenging journey that had led me right back to this exact room. Beside me, Danielle and Kelsey offered silent, fiercely supportive nods, fully acknowledging the monumental power shift we had just accomplished against impossible, deeply entrenched industry odds. With a remarkably steady hand and a deeply satisfied heart, I boldly signed my name confidently across the thick stack of binding legal documents to finalize the historic takeover. The black ink dried quickly. Kenneth watched the formal signing ceremony unfold with a sickening expression of absolute defeat, slowly realizing his dictatorial reign over the prestigious design department had officially and permanently ended. Garrett coldly instructed him to immediately begin transferring all crucial departmental data and confidential client files to my newly formed transition team by the absolute end of the business day. The disgraced senior partner silently gathered his scattered negotiation notes and practically fled the tense boardroom, completely unable to stomach the humiliating reality of his severe professional demotion. I watched his retreating back. Stepping confidently into my brand new executive role as the Global Director of Innovative Design, I immediately initiated the radical structural overhaul I had explicitly promised. I bypassed the sluggish corporate hierarchy entirely, directly establishing our rigorous, merit-based talent evaluation framework across every single international branch of the sprawling architectural company. We aggressively began replacing outdated senior management teams with brilliant, unrecognized junior drafters who possessed the actual field expertise required to execute sustainable luxury. The corporate revolution started immediately. My fiercely dedicated core team seamlessly integrated our highly successful Lumina workflows directly into the sluggish corporate machine, instantly boosting overall operational efficiency and drastically reducing project overruns. Kelsey aggressively updated their archaic digital engineering platforms to prevent catastrophic structural errors, while Danielle completely overhauled destructive botanical sourcing protocols to strictly mandate native, eco-friendly vegetation. The formerly toxic office environment rapidly transformed into a vibrant, collaborative workspace where raw talent and innovative ecological ideas were actively rewarded over meaningless academic prestige. The toxic culture shifted permanently. Looking out over the revitalized architectural department from my new corner office, I felt a profound sense of genuine professional vindication wash over me. The influential conglomerate that had once casually discarded my entire life's work like absolute garbage was now successfully operating under my exact ecological and administrative vision. We had successfully dismantled the oppressive corporate machinery from the harsh outside, only to completely rebuild it from the inside with authentic integrity and world-class architectural skill. The ultimate payback was flawlessly complete. On my first official day back in the massive Apex headquarters, the real, sweeping structural changes officially began. I immediately dismantled the archaic human resources protocols that had systematically prioritized expensive academic pedigrees over tangible, highly practical design mechanics for decades. My newly appointed corporate transition team swiftly implemented our rigorous, blind submission testing framework across every single international branch of the sprawling global conglomerate to ensure absolute fairness. The entrenched corporate hierarchy fractured. A few stubborn senior directors desperately attempted to bypass my strict new evaluation mandates, secretly trying to funnel their underqualified wealthy fraternity brothers into prominent management positions. I aggressively audited their compromised divisional workflows, publicly exposing how their favored legacy hires consistently produced catastrophic structural blueprints that blatantly violated modern environmental safety codes. Facing immediate termination for gross professional negligence, the last remaining remnants of the toxic old guard quietly surrendered their undeserved executive authority and packed up their expensive offices. True meritocracy finally reigned. Kenneth completely failed to adapt to this revolutionary egalitarian structure that actively stripped away his deeply entrenched elitist privileges and unchecked administrative power. Completely isolated from all crucial conceptual decisions and thoroughly humiliated by his newly subordinate status, his daily existence within the bustling office became an unbearable, suffocating nightmare. Garrett officially terminated his lucrative employment contract entirely before the end of the first fiscal quarter, citing an absolute, irreconcilable inability to align with our modern sustainability goals. His arrogant reign ended. I stood quietly on the upper glass mezzanine and watched as the formerly untouchable director silently packed his meager personal belongings into a standard cardboard box. Without his invisible army of chronically undervalued junior drafters to secretly fix his disastrous mechanical mistakes, his entire fraudulent professional reputation had instantly crumbled into worthless dust. He walked out through the soaring, sunlit lobby without a single employee looking up from their drafting tables to bid him a fond or respectful farewell. He left completely alone. Within 12 months of our aggressive operational restructuring, the overall financial and ecological outcomes of our newly revitalized departments were absolutely staggering to the international market. Tristan's highly anticipated private island project was beautifully salvaged through our indigenous botanical integration methods, ultimately completing complex construction phases several months ahead of projected schedules. Global investors overwhelmingly praised the drastic reduction in wasted structural materials, eagerly pouring massive amounts of fresh capital into our rapidly expanding international property portfolio. The corporate profits soared. Danielle and Kelsey absolutely thrived within this liberated corporate ecosystem, joyfully stepping into prominent mentorship roles for our rapidly growing, highly diverse international workforce. They actively cultivated a deeply collaborative studio environment where fresh, brilliant minds from obscure community colleges could freely pitch groundbreaking ecological concepts without any lingering fear of harsh retribution. The formerly oppressive atmosphere of constant executive anxiety was permanently replaced by an electrifying, unifying hum of genuine creative passion and mutual professional respect across all departments. We built an architectural sanctuary. Looking back at the brutal, chaotic trajectory of my career, I realize profoundly that true professional value can never be accurately measured by a prestigious university degree. The toxic corporate executives who once sneered at my humble background completely underestimated the raw, unstoppable power of relentless dedication and deeply practical, hands-on mechanical expertise. You must intimately know the literal dirt beneath your feet before you can ever realistically hope to build a magnificent, enduring structure that genuinely touches the sky. Authenticity permanently defeats arrogance. Whenever someone arrogantly attempts to throw your life's work onto the floor, you must firmly and unapologetically refuse to stay down on your trembling knees. Every single painful rejection and deeply unfair demotion I previously endured merely served as the crucial, unshakable foundational concrete for my ultimate, undeniable industry takeover. Your unique, hard-earned perspective is a profoundly powerful weapon, and no corporate bully possesses the absolute, unquestionable authority to dictate your true, underlying worth to the professional world. Own your brilliant capability. Thank you so incredibly much for listening to my journey from a discarded, underpaid junior drafter to the definitive leader of a massive global architectural revolution. I genuinely hope this story inspires you to fiercely defend your own unacknowledged talents and aggressively challenge the outdated elitist systems currently holding you back from your ultimate potential. Please share your own triumphant workplace experiences or resilient thoughts in the comments section below so we can continue building a wonderfully supportive digital community together. Let your powerful voice echo.